we'll just go ahead and get started in the interest of time. So we really, the idea today was to go over the preliminary program for the conference that's coming up in May, and also to discuss some expectations of collaborators and funded people, et cetera. So let's just dive in. You can see on your screen right now I have up the draft program, and we'll just go through this briefly, and then I'll ask if there's any questions on this, and then I'll move into the, some of the expectations. So basically on Monday and Tuesday, May 18th and 19th, we are going to be offering a training here at CSU. This is before the actual conference starts. This training will be for students, postdocs, and early career scientists. We're limiting it to 25 participants. So if you have people, if you know people who are interested, encourage them to register for that early because it will be capped at 25. I don't have this in front of me, but under the Revamp website on the conference website, there's a tab for the training that has the draft schedule for those 2 days. But basically, it's a sort of an introduction to the 3 foundational science areas that the North Central Climate Science Center works on, as well as an overview of some of the tools that the different research groups use. So that's the deal on training. Starting on Wednesday, May 20th, the actual conference will start. The yellow highlighting here are people who have been invited or who were thinking of invited, but these aren't confirmed yet. So that's what the yellow highlighting means. Basically, we'll start the day with some welcome, and then scrolling for people to see on the welcomes, and then the first plenary session we've invited Secretary Sally Jewell to be our keynote speaker that morning. We haven't heard back from her yet. We've also contacted Sarah Riker as a potential backup for her. I should mention the first day we kind of are having the idea to have integrated discussion of science and management throughout the entire conference, but a little bit heavier focus on science on the first day, and a little bit heavier focus on management on the second day. So sorry, back to plenary 1. After the keynote, we'll have Kate Kitchell from BLM, and she will introduce the link of science to management, and then Jeff will be going over the concept of revamp science. Moving on to plenary 2, this is where the leaders of each foundational science area will have a time to do a presentation on their foundational science areas. In the afternoon, we'll have 3 concurrent sessions. This is where we're going to have contributed talks and panel discussions. From 3:30 to 4:30, a session for just USGS personnel, a strategy session that Jeff Morset will be running, and then a poster session that late afternoon. The next day, Thursday, like I said, this one day is a little bit more heavy on management, starting in the morning with a keynote speaker from Ben Babowski from Rocky Mountain National Park. Next, a panel discussion focusing on regional management. Andrea Ray from NOAA will give a introductory talk there, and you can see the panelists. Plenary 4 is where we will have an invited plenary session. These projects are the projects that connect climate science to management issues, as well as, so these are our 3 currently funded management projects, as well as the integrative Drought Project. And at the end of that session, Jeff will give an introduction to the newly funded management, or the newly recommended to be funded management projects who are asking to have a poster at the poster session. The afternoon of that day, another concurrent session of contributed talks and panels, followed by a joint stakeholder committee meeting, if you're on that committee, from 3:30 to 4:30, another poster session, and then the conference banquet that evening with Dan Wildcat as the speaker. The last day, we want to do some synthesis. In the morning, a last contributed 3 concurrent sessions, followed by breakout groups, where we'll have specific topics, management-relevant topics to discuss in smaller groups, followed by reporting back from those groups, some closing reflections from Dennis and Jeff, and also Ken Salazar has been invited to be the closing keynote speaker, but we haven't heard back from him yet. So I'm just going to pause for a moment here and ask if there's any questions or comments on the program before we move on. Nothing? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to switch from this to Okay. Has it switched on everyone's screen to a PowerPoint now with some bullet points of expectations?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Great. So a lot of people have been contacted individually about specific talks we invite them to do and things, but just in general, we wanted to go over, in our minds, sitting here at the center, what some of the expectations are for our collaborators, to how we would wish that people would be involved. So for the leads of the foundational science areas, we would like, they'll be presenting in that first day invited session. For university consortium members, we would love to have at least one representative from each consortium university attend the conference. And, you know, to be active participants to submit an abstract either for an oral or poster presentation, and also to encourage your students, postdocs, and other collaborators to participate as well. You've been communicated with separately. Also, we do have some travel funds available. For the currently funded management projects, I've also communicated with you individually, but to give a presentation in the second day invited session, and that includes Shannon McNeely's Drought Project. For the newly recommended for funding projects, we would like each project to send a rep and a poster. Jeff has or will be communicating with you about that if he hasn't yet. If you were previously funded but you're not currently funded, there's no hard expectation except that we would ask you to at least consider submitting an abstract and attending, but, you know, we understand. USGS collaborators, there's, as I mentioned before, there's a Wednesday afternoon strategy session for you for the joint stakeholder committees. There's a Thursday afternoon meeting. To everyone, we would appreciate spreading the word, you know, to your network and encouraging collaborators to participate. And also remember to recommend that training for students and early career scientists that's happening just prior to the main conference. Any questions at the moment?
Yeah, this is Susan Scoggins. You mentioned you wanted the USGS collaborators to join in on a strategy session, and did you say that was Wednesday or Thursday afternoon?
That is Wednesday afternoon, 3:30 to 4:30.
Okay, is that the one that's called the Joint Stakeholders, or is that a different title?
That is a different title. That is the session on Thursday afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah, the Joint Stakeholder Committee is sort of what our Stakeholder Advisory Committee is morphing into. It will be a joint advisory committee for the USDA Climate Hub and for the North Central Climate Science Center.
Okay.
And Jill, I can add a little to that. This is Jeff Morissette, and so I noticed that Jay Hesbeck, our new chair, and welcome Jay. He's taking over for Warren Day for anyone on the phone. Warren's going to go do some more science work, I guess, and stepping out of his role at the regional office. And Jay, who was the interim director before I took the job, is now going to be our regional office representative and thus the co-chair for the joint stakeholder group, and that's with the USDA Hub. I know it's Gary Davis, and there's probably some other stakeholder group members on here. Justin Derner with the USDA Hub and I are working on a letter that, and kind of the terms of reference of that new group will be coming out, I'm hoping this week or next. So just, it's a little bit maybe premature. I was hoping to get that letter out sooner, but watch for that, and it'll describe what our strategy is for that joint stakeholder group. And it might be our first chance during this open science conference to take advantage of anybody that's around from those groups to have an hour session just to kind of work with Justin, introduce the USDA Hub and talk about that. And on the USGS breakout on Wednesday, I've written to the center directors for all the centers in our domain and region, so they'd be aware of it. But any USGS people would be welcome to attend, and it will just be USGS because I want to talk about some of the funding that we're doing and the modeling going on into 16 and beyond. And so it's more of a strategy of how we take advantage of USGS personnel to support the climate science centers. So that's just it's a bit of a strategy session, again, taking advantage of anybody that might be there. So that's just some background on that. And I could just pause and see if Jay wants to comment or chime in. Again, welcome to him as our new co-chair of that joint group.
Thanks, Jeff. And all I can say is that I'm extremely impressed with the conference agenda that you folks have just gone over, and it looks like a wonderful opportunity to find how we can all work together.
Great, thanks.
I wanted to run an idea by everybody now, brainstorm on this. Dennis had an idea of asking projects, these are probably would work best with the projects that are going on right now that have a more end-to-end focus, meaning brainstorm on the best way for these funded collaborators to present to both present their work and to sort of explicitly make it clear of how their work is taking advantage of all three of the foundational science areas. So one idea was Dennis suggested but wanted to get feedback on. He's in the airplane right now, so he couldn't be on to talk about this himself, but is to have projects, if they're agreeable, do a suite of posters instead of just one posters for a project, but a suite of posters to more fully explain the project. So there could be like one panel on climate, one panel on impact, another panel on responses, stakeholder engagement, and then like an overall synthesis poster. Now, that's a lot of work, I know. So any feedback on that idea? Or other ideas of sort of how to more fully present the end-to-end project, and the involvement of all the foundational science areas?
And you're talking about this is Joe Barsuglia, you're talking about the newly funded projects?
No, this would be for ongoing projects, because I believe the newly funded projects will not be nearly far enough along to...
But I was going to suggest, because we put this later on the agenda, but all the newly funded projects, we really need to deliberately coordinate with the foundational science areas Otherwise, it will slip a little bit. So.
Yes. And I do not, is there, Jeff, can you see the participant list? Is there anybody from the newly recommended for funding projects on the call?
I am. This is Shannon.
Shannon with Wind River. I don't see any other folks.
And this is Brian Miller. I'm here as well. So.
Okay, great. That would be Amy Simpson. I mean, one of the things for those posters, I could take the action to communicate with the newly funded project, maybe highlight where those 3 foundational areas are going to be part of their work. But I think one poster and kind of summarizing that, but calling out those, asking for a section in that poster that describes those 3 areas, something they could do just related to their plans. You know, they're just going to be up and running, so it would be preliminary, but I think they should be able to articulate that.
And I think because of the way things were done with the last, there's varying degrees of interaction. Like I've interacted very strongly with Susan Scoggins and Helen Sofer's project, but less so with others. So I think you're going to find that across the different projects, there's various levels of interaction with the various parts of our triad. So,
yeah, this is Shannon.
You know, mandating 3 separate posters on the 3 different aspects is not necessarily going to be going to work that well, but mandating that people talk about those and how they dealt with climate and how they dealt with these things might be a very good, you know, maybe more than 1 poster so that people have the room to talk about it. That would be my sort of my observation on the way things have gone.
Yeah, I agree, Joe. I don't think it makes sense to ask each of the projects to do additional posters or necessarily talk about how they engage with the teams, but maybe make it more conceptual across the 3 areas, like Joe said.
But also to set up with the new projects a more deliberate.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, because I'll probably be the one doing the poster for Wind River, and I could easily having just a section of it, you know, have a little short section on the 3 foundational science areas, but not another poster.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. This is Susan Scoggin, and we're one of the ongoing projects, and we have worked very closely with the climate group and a bit less so with the adaptation group. So, I mean, we probably could do a poster with our work with the climate group and then a poster on the impacts. But Shannon, unless you want to help, I'd be hard-pressed to do the other one. Although, you know, we will be emphasizing how our work relates to management issues, so that might count. Jill, I'd love some clarity on posters or having the scientists put abstracts in for the contributed sessions for these ongoing projects. We were planning to just do talks rather than posters. Do you have any preference on that?
Well, that's fine. I mean, you are scheduled in that one, the invited session, but for additional collaborators that want to talk about also pieces of the project, either way, they can select oral or poster, you know, on the abstract submission system. We don't.
Okay.
I don't believe we have a strong preference for that. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure.
Jill, how many of those are you thinking there are going to be total? It looks like from the agenda you've got 2 sessions for the contributions and okay, 3 concurrent.
There's 3 sessions, 3 concurrent, 4 in each. That's 12 times 3, 36 slots.
At two separate times, right?
At 3 times. There's a
3 times. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is Marcy Bidwell with the Southwest Colorado Project, and I can take it back to my team and see what interest there would be in multiple posters. I'm sure with many projects like ours, there's more things than one can talk about in one particular session. And so if the group has interest in voicing some of the diversity of our project, a poster might work. But I am reluctant to commit to the time commitment without consulting with my team first.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. Yes, please discuss it with them. Yeah, I mean, that was the idea, is that 15 minutes isn't, very long for them to fully develop, a lot of the connections that went on in these projects. So, as you and the team see fit, Okay. Also note, I know it's coming up extremely quickly, but at the moment we have a deadline of January 30th for abstract submissions to allow us to have turnaround time to review everything and assign to sessions and such. So, yeah, sorry about the short notice, but that's possible there could be an extension, but but just keep that date in mind, please. Okay, if there's not any more questions on the conference at the moment, we can move on to the second part of the check-in agenda, is to go do the check-in part with, and
hey, could I ask, this is Andy, could I ask just one quick question about the conference?
Sure.
I believe Joe and I were asked to be part of the training on one of the 2 days, and I wonder which day and which portion of the day those might be. If that's the case. I'm trying to schedule a meeting on one of those days, and so it'd be helpful to know now.
I'm pulling up.
And we had sort of doing in the typical order: Monday, half a day for climate, kind of a 1 hour lecture type of talk by the climate foundational science area, and then the tools, kind of maybe Climate Wizard or some of the things that we've done with graphics that Marion Talbert has worked on. The second half of that day being impacts with Andy and your team, or our June giving a 1 hour roughly talk, and then probably going more into species distribution modeling and the STOM tools, and then Tuesday being the adaptation and some of the interview process and tools that Shannon's using, as well as the state and transition modeling, which is kind of halfway between impacts and adaptation, that Brian's doing. But Andy, I think we could that's not set in concrete, so we could maybe perhaps move adaptation to the first day. We do see these things as nonlinear and interrelated, so I don't think the order is absolutely critical. And if you needed to be there one day or another, or it was better, let's communicate on that, and we can, I think, be flexible.
Thanks. I think either day is fine. On the day that we're not talking, we'd like to go up to Rocky Mountain Park for a meeting with folks there. So I'll just ask them if Tuesday works for them for that, and assume that I'll be with you all on one day.
That sounds great, and let me know if they prefer Monday and we need to put you to Tuesday, because we can certainly do that.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Sure.
All right. So I guess we'll just start the check-in part now, unless anyone has a last question on the conference.
And maybe we could ask Marcy to go first if there is anything to check in, so she can get back to the training that her and I both stepped out of, and then kind of excuse that project.
Sure. I can definitely give a short overview. We have been making significant progress in understanding our social vulnerability. We have one of our 2 areas interview reports from our stakeholders completed in a draft form, and we're starting to circulate that amongst our team, and we'll have it to this broader audience shortly. And the Gunnison Valley social science report for both their scenario planning process and their interviews are also in development, and we have a short summary of the kind of lessons learned as a part of that process that we're reviewing as a team and will share soon. In both basins, we've been developing ecological response models for our 4 targets. We have 2 of those drafted and reviewed by stakeholders in the Gunnison Valley, and we are working on scheduling 2 for the San Juan. We're also looking to bring together our social and ecological findings by creating what we're starting to call our social ecological response model. And we're exploring different tools of combining different frameworks and different tools to figure out a way to do that together, both as a team and with our stakeholders. Our big goals for this spring are to plan a workshop and or conference in each basin where we kind of run through everything from our climate models that MTI has developed, our scenarios, and then through to the social ecological response model and begin the conversation of adaptation strategies. And our goal for this year will be to draft adaptation strategies both collectively and with our individual agencies so that we can move that project, that piece of our work significantly forward. That's kind of my update. Any questions?
Thanks, Marcy.
Yeah, I have a question, Marcy. This is Shannon. I just am curious what the status of the social research is now that Karina left. Has Lori kind of stepped up to carry the ball with that, or is someone else taking over that element?
That's a great question, Shannon. So Karina wrote the interview report for the San Juans, and for those on this call that aren't familiar with what Karina's role was, Karina was a postdoc working with Lori Young on our team, and she did the interviews and in the San Juan Basin, and then worked with me to do the scenario workshops. Before she left, she did draft the first round of the interview report and did a second review of that report after some edits from Lori, Renee, and myself. And then Lori and Renee and I have been working on that report to complete it. We're now in the feedback phase of that, and Karina is still available for questions and kind of continuing work on the analysis piece as more of an advisor at this point in time. And then, so yes, Lori has stepped up. She's always been an active piece, but now she's flying solo, and Dan Williams has also been actively involved from the U.S. Forest Service Rocky Mountain Research Station.
Great. And another quick question, and we can take this offline if you don't have time to get into it now, but last we spoke, you were doing some tribal engagement work, and you were getting ready to set up for a meeting, and then I didn't kind of hear what happened with that. Did you end up having that meeting? Was that good?
We are scheduled to have that meeting in February. We've had a couple of smaller one-on-ones and sitting down with the interdisciplinary team to just gain trust and get to know one another. And so basically we're on a much slower trajectory. And Shannon, I would love to follow up with you offline because I have many pieces in process I'd love to get your input on. And then also the tribe has expressed, I think what they're interested in, they're very interested in our project, but also something much larger that would be much more of a tribal vulnerability assessment, and then looking at adaptation planning for the whole enterprise and community. And so I think there's a lot more opportunity there that this project has really warmed them up towards more partnership going forward. And it would be great to talk through with you.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds great. Get in touch for sure.
And as a bit of a tangent, Michelle, I forget her last name, but from the BIA Southern Rocky District is actually at this training. So that's Colorado and New Mexico region of BIA. So.
Which is also very exciting. We've been doing a little more outreach to the Southern Ute Tribe, which is neighbors to the Mountain Ute Tribe, which also works with the same BIA. And they are interested, and I've helped them secure some funding for doing some more GIS and vulnerability analysis. We're getting some, and so they're coming on board. I think we'll see them participate in this project some this year as we go forward. And so it's been discussed in the tribal world. It takes a lot longer. The time trajectory takes a while. So.
Great, thanks. That sounds good. We'll definitely talk.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any other questions? Fantastic. That's the end of our report from Southwest Colorado.
Okay.
Thanks.
So should we skip back up and cover the foundational science areas and continue down the list here?
Sure.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Shannon, anything on adaptation?
Yeah, so a couple things since the last check-in. One, with the Drought Project, the Drought Risk and Adaptation Interior Project, we're continuing to evolve the database with the interviews with managers, including now the interviews I've done at the Wind River Reservation. So that's coming up with some really interesting differences between that landscape and the Northwest Colorado and Southwest South Dakota. And then simultaneously, we've started to work with some of our staff at the center to integrate interviews with climate data and drought indicator data in the RAM. So we are preparing for a visit from headquarters to talk about some evolution of drought funding or drought project work, also with the South Central Climate Science Center and the Southwest Climate Science Center. So we'll keep everyone posted as that evolves, because it will inevitably lead to bringing in more from the other foundational science areas. We're just kind of in the data collection phase and starting to look at how we can visualize the data on the VisWall based on the input from managers on how drought is impacting those different landscapes. So that's pretty exciting. Jeff, I don't know if you wanted to say anything else about the headquarters visit. If not, I can go ahead and move on.
No, I think that covers it. It's a very preliminary. They got some 15 funding, looking to do it further, and it's really kind of setting up what that would be, and it is more in those other regions, but using the resource for advanced modeling to facilitate those meetings. So it's a little bit peripheral, but related in that they'll take it, use some of our expertise and facilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the exciting part is really, starting to use the RAM to look at how we do this integration. The Wind River Reservation Project, we're continuing to work closely with the tribes there and doing a webinar with their water board on February 18th and a workshop the first week of March at the reservation, starting to really look at how to get the process going for their drought preparedness planning effort at the reservation. So that's really fun stuff. And then another quick update. I see Bruce Rittenhouse is on the webinar. We meaning me, the North Central Climate Science Center, and Corey Knapp at Western State Colorado University are working with Bruce to do a social vulnerability analysis for the BLM climate adaptation strategy. And I don't know, Bruce, if you wanted to say a couple words about that quickly if you're on. Are you there? Are you muted? I see your name on the webinar. You might have stepped away. So anyway, so that's, we're getting that process set up. And some folks, I don't know if anyone is here on the webinar that we've talked about that project with, but we'll be connecting with some other folks both in BLM and throughout Colorado who have done some social vulnerability analysis work to hopefully bring them into the project as well. So I think that's about it for now.
Shannon, this is Jeff, just asking, maybe you could follow up with Bruce to maybe give a slide or two to Kate with her plenary talk to make sure that that project is at least mentioned during Kate's presentation at the Open Science Conference.
Yeah, good idea. Will do.
Thanks.
And Shannon, I assume, this is Joe, I assume you're going to be hanging on after this call to talk a little bit about coordination with among the fundamental science areas?
Yeah, Jeff and I talked about that. We weren't sure if we were going to do that today. I don't know, Jeff, because Jeff's at that webinar and Dennis isn't on. And
okay, well, then let me very quickly say, Shannon, I think it might be time for you and me and MTS to start some sort of regular short check-ins about climate data and your project. Like heads up, like what are people talking about? What indices are they looking at? What are they thinking of? Whether, before it comes down to like, oh, we need X. it'd be nice to know sort of what's coming up in discussion.
Yeah, definitely. And we talked about that as we're pulling this stuff together in the RAM, and we're kind of under the gun with this one because they're coming in a couple weeks. But certainly we intend to do that fully, Joe.
Well, and I kind of like to know what you're pulling together in the RAM and whether we need to be like, be there, that kind of thing. Whether we should be contributing anything or even just knowing what's going on. That would be, nothing, not a high maintenance thing here, just like heads up kind of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, add a little more level of detail than is here. That's all. I mean, whenever you think it's appropriate, but I think we really need to start at least touching base more frequently on the data issue.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I think this meeting on February 10th is very preliminary, but the idea would be that there would be the climate foundational science area, maybe a climatologist from the Southwest and South Central, and you guys have done a lot in that, at least the Colorado River Basin, to say, to be included on those sessions. But this is so preliminary that it's just people from headquarters coming out kind of figure out what they're doing. So it's they want to keep it small. It's making sausage. So no need for the other foundational science areas to be there. But there will be a need for the subsequent work that comes from it, I believe.
Yeah, and we've got that February 24th all-day meeting planned already after that check-in. So I think that was what we were thinking when we would really kind of roll our sleeves up about that and hatch a plan.
Okay, but just just keeping us a little bit in the loop as to what's going on. Nothing high cost or high time here. Just that would be great. Before just let us know. It sounds like you're right. You're focusing on February 24th for the bulk of the work, interaction, and planning. Like we need to do X, Y, and Z. But since this is coming up, it'd be great to just know.
Mhm.
Okay.
Joe, do you want to go next on any update from the climate team?
Yes, I do. We have a fairly big update. Because of some health issues, I've actually gone down to, I've had to reduce my hours for the next couple of months. And because of that, Imtiaz Rangwala, who's on the call and here across the corridor from me, is going to be taking over a lot of the duties of climate team lead. And I will still be involved. As a matter of fact, I might be involved, be involved a little bit more because I'm shedding a lot of other duties as well. But really, Imtiaz will be the, if you want to contact the climate team lead, email Imtiaz and me, but Imtiaz will probably be the one responding for the next few weeks. And he will be taking over the climate team lead. We're kind of envisioning this as co-leads, but he'll be the one transitioning into that. But again, I will still be involved in the projects I am. So Imtiaz, you want to say hi?
Yes, hi. Hi, everybody. So thanks, Joe. Thanks for the intro. Thanks for helping me just, get a sense of the landscape that's there. And but nonetheless, as Marcy alluded my name earlier, I've been involved in the Southwest Colorado project that's been funded by the Climate Center, and so very much aware of many of the folks involved at the Climate Center and the other projects that's going on funded by the center. So happy to be around, happy to be involved, and just I'm still learning a lot, and I still need to learn a lot about where things are, and hoping to be in touch with many of you.
Yeah. So Imtiaz, if you don't know, has a background in environmental science, but he really also specializes in climate of mountainous regions. So that's where he comes from. So a couple of other reports from the climate team. So I've been, we have not hired a postdoc yet. Matter of fact, our best prospects are a little bit in the future, so we're actually finding ways to do the work that we've said to do through funding existing people around here. We're trying to get Mike Hobbins involved with the ET work a little bit more intensely, and I'll be involved with some of that work. So we've made a little bit of progress on 3 fronts, and I've created, right now I've created a set of web pages at the University of Colorado's Google Sites which I intend to be draft web pages, which will be transferred over to a Confluence wiki once we feel comfortable setting that up. So any of you who are interested in the following topics, just drop me and Imtiaz, but me an email, since I run the site. We're developing a little bit of guidance based on some of the projects on use of climate models. So some of the work that I did with Helen, I've written that up, describing a little bit of the methodologies that we considered and why we chose certain ones for use on her project and the use of climate data. The second one is, very briefly, Gabriel Sine and I are working on just a list of evapotranspiration and potential evapotranspiration data sets that are out there, most of which, or many of which, are available at North Central, and some of their characteristics, and pretty soon some of their what we view to be their sort of strengths and weaknesses. So we have a table of ET data sets that we're trying to flesh out. These are, again, projects. They're working projects. They're not finished products. And finally, we're working a little bit with Jared and the group up at and Steve Running's group to try and prototype some better wind data sets for use, downscaled wind data sets for use in ecological modeling. So those three topics are kind of covered on a bunch of pages. If you're interested, I will have to just send you an email giving you permission to get to those sites. So that's a project we've made on that. The final thing is, when I was at the American Meteorological Society meeting, Chris Milley, who's a noted hydrologist in Princeton, at USGS hydrologist, gave us sort of a shake-up, shook us up, this talk about how our evapotranspiration methods might fail miserably under climate change scenarios. Mike Ovens and I and other people are still trying to make sense of what he said, but the implications, if he's right, are kind of problematic, and we're just trying to work through that, whether he's right or not. The gist of it is that even Penman-Monteith, the most physically based ET method that people use offline, overestimates drying. So it has implications for future drought. We're trying to work through that. I'm trying to write up a little bit of a summary of what we've found, and I will share that with the team as sort of a briefing paper when that's done. So that's where we are on the science. And again, we want to make sure that we get the newly funded projects to establish an interaction with us from the beginning. So we need to set up some structure for that as soon as we can.
Yeah, I think that meeting on the 24th, where the foundational science area is, it's our next monthly check-in, but they'll be there for the full day. That's the key point of that day-long session. Now we know the 5 projects.
Right, and to make sure that we actually understand their needs and establish a working relationship at the beginning. And again, we'll have both Imtiaz and me to sort of, cover for each other. So I think it'll work a little bit smoother.
And let me just say thank you to Imtiaz for joining in, and I've seen his work in the Southwest Colorado, and it's been fantastic, and it's been very well received. And thanks to Joe for working with Imtiaz and myself, and Chris and Averett there at U Boulder for kind of guiding through this transition and figuring out what makes sense. I think we're at a place that's kind of 2 for the price of 1, maybe. I don't know if it's roughly speaking, but having Joe and Imtiaz both involved with this foundational science area are going to be excellent. I think continue to grow that foundational science area. So thanks to you guys for the flexibility.
And Andy, at some point, Imtiaz, you and I have to set up a call so we can just come up to speed and bring him up to speed about what's going on in the foundational science that you're doing.
Yeah, that sounds good. And maybe the 24th is a good day to do that as well.
Yeah, I was hoping we could have a shorter call before that just to bring him into the loop.
Good, yeah.
I know you're very busy, but I mean, I'm thinking of something like, half an hour or something like that.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay.
So quick question, how long are you guys planning on staying on the 24th? Are we going to go the whole day that day? I was, in the end, able to reschedule my appointment, Jeff, so I'll be available till the end of the day if we need to do that.
Let's take it offline. I have blocked out the whole day, and it'll probably depend on Andy's flights and what Joe is and MTS are doing with respect to travel. But I kind of have it blocked off 9 to 5. But we'll see what the transportation constraints are, especially for Andy.
I think we usually find that 7 o'clock flight back to Bozeman works, and I think usually leaving by, what, 3:30 to 4 from Fort Collins is adequate? Like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Andy, do you want to give an update on impacts, and then you could actually lead into Whitebark Pine as well?
That sounds good. Arjun's been busy working on basically trying to categorize fragmentation as a function of land use change across the CSC. Arjun, would you want to let them know the kind of tasks, kind of projects you've been doing, kind of activities?
Yeah, just right now I'm working on the pace, delineating the pace and simplifying instruction developed by Nate and Corey Davis, so that everybody can understand and everybody can follow the instruction. So far, there is some progress. I'm able to simplify the instruction and able to produce or delineate the pace for 3 national parks, the Rocky Mountain, Grand Teton, and Yellowstone. By the end of next week, I'll be finalize the pace area for all, 10 national parks. I'm expecting to analyze for the fragmentation and land use change and some ecosystem characteristics. So I'll first, and by the time of next check-in call, I'll have definitely lots of progress and lots of analysis for those national parks. And I have a quick question for Jeff. Do you have any other new area to analyze for the land use change that we talked in November?
So the 5 kind of study areas for the 5 new projects would be the priority, and I haven't actually got kind of shape files or any explicit work on, or details or files on that. But I could take the action to write them for it. We've got Brian and Shannon related to those 2 projects. I don't know if they could work with Bob Flynn to kind of get some sort of polygon that describes the areas they're working and get those to Arjun, and I could work with the other 3 projects. Although you guys work with Ben Poulter. You could work directly with Ben Poulter on his project, and then I'll.
Okay, thanks, Arjun. Just to, in case anybody is not familiar with this term PACE, it's basically the greater ecosystems that are centered on the national parks or national forests, basically the units of public land, protected area centered ecosystem. And so that would include the public lands and then the private lands that are connected ecologically to those public lands. So we're seeing those as important units for analysis of land use change and climate change. Just a few additional things on the impacts activities. We're excited about Ben Poulter's modeling project dealing with sagebrush as one of the newly funded projects, and the impacts team will be interacting regularly with Ben's group on that. Some of you might know Kevin Gertzweiler. He's a biostatistician and landscape ecologist at Baylor. He's interested in working on metrics of fragmentation and connectivity associated with the natural cover type fragmentation work that Arjun described. So over the coming year, hopefully he'll be helping us with that and being co-author in some of the papers. And then thirdly, we've been working on a first draft of chapters for a book on climate change in the Rockies and the Appalachians and consequences for management. It comes from our NASA project, but there's lots of overlap with the ecological impacts work within the Climate Science Center. So basically this is aimed at trying to integrate what's known about climate change and consequence on ecological processes and consequences for elements of biodiversity and how you translate that to management. So my hope is that much of what comes out of that book helps us really do decision support effectively across the full CSC domain. So we're pretty excited about it. So that's pretty much what's happening with the foundational science area. With regard to Whitebark Pine, very briefly, we had about 2 weeks ago a rather special 3-day Whitebark Pine ski summit with Jesse Logan's group. This was done at a remote cabin outside of Cook City, where we spent a lot of time on skis looking at whitebark pine stands that are some of the healthiest climax whitebark in the Yellowstone area, talking a lot about the climate conditions in those stands that perhaps have allowed beetles to be less effective in causing mortality in whitebark. And what sort of management strategies might be appropriate given what we learned from those kind of stands, and how those management strategies could be done in an adaptive management context to try to improve knowledge while actually doing the management. So it's a really productive couple of days. That is leading to specifically developing alternative management scenarios that would be GYE-wide. This is one of the objectives of our project, and it's really we're actively working on it now. Tom Olof is more or less in the lead on it, and Katie Ireland, a postdoc in my lab, is working with Tom and working with I on basically trying to incorporate the best climate science studies that have been done here in recent years, like Tony Chang's work on climate suitability for whitebark, and Jeff Hickey and Polly Boodle's work on bark beetle climate suitability, to integrate those all into consideration with regard to distribution of management treatments across the system. So those are the kind of things happening. Yeah.
Andy, it's Shannon. Does your output? I know the GYE includes the Wind River range. Does your output that you've done to date on the whitebark pine include the Wind Rivers as well already, or would that be something that would have to be an add-on to what you've done already?
No, that's within the study area we're looking at.
Okay, great. It'd be good to talk sometime, maybe on the 24th, about what you have that could be applied to the Wind River project.
Yeah, I would like to do that with you. I don't know the extent to which the Wind River folks have been participating in the the GYCC and particularly the Whitebark Pine Subcommittee, but
they haven't. I don't think they have much, but certainly your work would be of interest to them.
Yes, and
because their water source comes from the Wind River Range, so we can talk about that later, but I think that would be good to talk about on the 24th.
Good.
Okay, thanks, Andy. We only have a few minutes left, but Susan, would you like to give an update on the Surrogate Species Project?
Sure. I'll make this fairly brief. I think the most exciting thing that's happened in our project is sort of a draft paper that's finally come together that Helen has been able to finish. This was work that she started on very early in the project, and it was looking at projected distributions of prairie pothole wetlands in the future relative to climate change. And there has been question of whether the emphasis on conservation should shift to the east if there's too much drying in the west. And so she has a really nice approach, I think. She's used the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service waterfowl breeding populations and habitat survey, also known as the May Pond Count, and the new climate models in CMIP-5. I think she randomly selected 10 of them. And with Joe's guidance, was able to find a way to use these by, and Joe can talk about this, jumping into model space, which is something that the climate scientists do, but the ecologists haven't done so much. And what that basically means is using hindcasting of the models to then compare with the future models so that a lot of the biases are taken out. And then the real piece that we had to wait for, and finally appeared, was the evapotranspiration data across the years of her work. And so that came, some of that stuff was actually done for her. And so through the VIC model, the variable infiltration capacity, it's a macro scale hydrologic model. She was able to pull out evapotranspiration, runoff, soil moisture, all kinds of wonderful variables, and basically has found that there really should be little trade-off between where you put conservation investments in the future relative to now, because even though there will be some drying, and that's if Penman-Monteith doesn't overestimate drying. If it does overestimate drying, then there'll be even less than she's projected. Even though there will be drying, just the landscape right now has multitudes of wetlands in areas that, even though there will be drying, that's still where most of the wetlands are going to be. So I think it's a really nice paper. It's in the process of getting reviewed by the co-authors now. So the other part of the project that I think there's some great headway on is looking at the surrogate species concept and what species might be able to give us information about a suite of species so that the monitoring and management is, focuses on fewer species rather than in our case, the 116 some dependent, wetland-dependent birds. And because a lot of the surrogate species approaches now are using more expert opinion, sort of what experts know about the different habitat requirements and life histories of birds, it's not quantifiable, repeatable, or necessarily even transferable to other regions. And so Helen and Valerie and I and Barry Noon, and we've pulled in Kurt Flather, who Barry has worked with for many years on just these issues, are looking at contrasting at least two different quantitative approaches so that we can find something quantitative. Some standard clustering algorithms, but then there's a new approach that's just appearing in the literature now called the species archetype approach, which uses covariates such as land use and weather to also help delineate different clusterings. And so, you know, Helen, of course, is doing the bulk of the quantitative work here, but we're thinking through how to actually not only contrast these, but test to see how valid they are. So we're sort of in the weeds on that right now, but I think it's going to come out really nice. And I think that's all I'll say for now.
Hey, Susan, Andy, if maybe we would need to wait for the paper to be finished, but if there's any graphics just showing the projected ET or change in wetlands into the future across the domain under different scenarios, that would be super helpful to see.
Okay, and I'm certain I'll just make sure it's okay with Helen, and maybe we can just send you the draft. It has to get a little farther along, but that would, I'm sure it'll be ready to share fairly soon.
And this is Joe. I wouldn't want you to be too scared about what Chris Milley said about evapotranspiration in Penman-Monteith, because the more we look at it, you know, the more we think it's okay to. So.
Well, that's actually okay with me if it's overestimating drying, because less drying is always better.
Yeah, it has to do with arcana of how climate models handle stomatal resistance and CO2 fertilization. So I'll probably be running this by you, Andy, at some point as a reality check. So anyway, that briefing paper is most, half done. I have to do a little more work on it. So.
Does that have to do with the C3 and C4 grasses?
I mean, we're trying to unravel what he did, and we need to contact him and say, what did you do? Because he hasn't published it. So.
Okay.
But I did find, in the meantime, I found out a lot about how that climate models do incorporate stomatal resistance changes under CO2 fertilization, but you'll see. It's complicated, and I need to write it up.
Susan, if you could, I think we want to keep a placeholder for how, if and how that species archetype modeling could be integrated with the VizTrails or the SOM software.
Oh, definitely. Thank you.
Oh, good. That's going to be exciting to see what we can do there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know we're a little bit over. Brian, I know, has a quick comment on capacity building, so we'll let him have that.
Sure. Yeah, this is Brian Miller. Geneva Chong is out this week, and given that we're over time, and we do have a newsletter coming out here in the next couple of weeks that's going to focus on capacity building, I'll just kind of leave it at that and say keep your eyes out for the newsletter. There will be some details in there about the phenocams that have been deployed and those that are currently being deployed this spring in time for green up, as well as some more updates on the indigenous phenology work that's kind of relating some of the phenocam observations to on-the-ground sorts of observations of plant phenology. And I think I'll leave it there and just say, yeah, keep your eyes out for the newsletter. And Jeff, did you have anything? It's apropos that you're at a training this week.
Not really, just that's part of the capacity building, so living into it.
And I'll just say, this is Shannon, the newsletter is going to be a little bit late given the crunch time that we're under for this headquarters visit. So we were going to try and get it out February 1st. It's going to be probably a week or two late just because I only have Tyler 10 hours a week now, and the other stuff had to take priority. So it's close, but it's going to be a little bit late.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks everybody. I think unless there's any last questions, we'll sign off now.
Yep, just the next one is, I think, February 24th, and thank you very much, Jill, for the summary of the conference. I think that was clear to understand, and it's looking really good, so thanks for that.
Thanks. Okay.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, thanks.
Bye.